we need to talk about George Russell and contract talks because it's all getting a little silly now. Now, we've all seen reports George Russell is on the verge of signing a new contract, a 2-year deal for $30 million a year. So, slam dunk, George Russell is going to sign. No, he's not. When you look at the story itself is devoid of any facts, it's devoid of any quotes, it's devoid of any actual information. It is literally just somebody writing that George Russell is about to sign a new contract. That is it. It doesn't talk about any dates, it doesn't talk about any meetings that's happened, it doesn't talk about any progress that Mercedes and George's camp have actually made since the start of the season. Now, Toto, for many of his faults, is a shrewd businessman. It is one of his strong points, it is definitely his forte. He has Mercedes in a prime position. George Russell does not have many options outside of Mercedes. The top teams are all locked up. And with regards to George, you're looking at a case of it would be a Red Bull swap if Max was to leave, potentially Aston Martin, Cadillac coming in, maybe Alpine with a Mercedes engine supply. That is pretty much the scope of George Russell's options outside of Mercedes for 2026. Toto knows this. He holds the cards. Now, with regards to Max Verstappen, it's a case of waiting. Max Verstappen is a generational talent. He comes on the market, you make moves to make it happen. Aston Martin will provide the money, but doubts over the car, but we'll be hoping the personal relationship with Adrian sways it. Mercedes will be hoping the law of the works Mercedes team, and of course that talk that Mercedes engine is going to be dominant will be enough to convince Max's camp that he wants to come. George Russell will sign his new contract when Max Verstappen no longer becomes available to Toto Wolff. It's as simple as that. Now, with regards to Mercedes, they've got options on both their drivers. They will be out of contract at the end of 2025, but they will have extension options of a year, possibly 2 years on both of those drivers. Definitely on Kimi Antonelli, and most likely on George. We saw with Lewis Hamilton, there was an option to extend a year. George's contract will have an option to extend a year in it. They don't need to give him new contracts. They can trigger the extension that's already built into his current contract if they want to. Now, George's camp are doing their job. That's what George pays his management team. This is why George has a manager. They're putting pressure on Mercedes and Toto in particular to lock George down. They want to make out there's a market for him. They want to make out there's interest for him. They want to make out that actually he's the future. He's the team leader. He's performing. He's a Mercedes junior driver. They want to make Toto sign him now to take him off the market because that is their job. That is what they're paid to do. That is what George Russell pays them to do. So what will they do? They will leak all these stories. There's the pictures we saw of Flavio Briatore meeting with George Russell in the paddock just a few weeks ago. There's talk of a new contract. There's talk of outside interest. There's Christian Horner's interest in George Russell. It is done deliberately to force Mercedes into signing George Russell. That is what all this is about. Do I think that George will stay at Mercedes? Of course, he's performed really well this season. And of course, it is an option open to all parties. And I don't think Toto will be upset if he has to keep that partnership that he's currently got. But do I think that he would favour it over getting Max Verstappen? No, I don't. That's my point here. He will look to see what Max is doing, as he's openly admitted. He couldn't hold talks with Max's camp before because of the promise he made to Lewis. No such promise exists with George Russell. He is open to be able to talk to Max Verstappen to see what exactly Max needs to move to Mercedes. So, George Russell, new contract. George himself said when he signs a contract, it only takes 24 hours to sort out. So why are we 4 races in with no contract? Ask yourself that one.